All right. I think we'll have a few more people get in a couple minutes, but we just want to go ahead and get started so we'll be having a full hour today. Welcome to part 2 of Why Invest, a dual webinar with Convergent Nonprofit Solutions and Golden Shovel Agency. I will be kind of facilitating some of the conversations today. My name is Kirsty McPherson. I'm the marketing director at Golden Shovel. We want to just welcome everyone. So this is obviously a 2-part series. Part 1 happened earlier this month, well, technically the end of, earlier this month. And if you haven't seen that yet, I encourage you to go on and look at the links of past webinars on Golden Shovel and I believe Convergent as well. So be sure to kind of keep looking at some of those things if you haven't done so. Just a couple housekeeping items. One, this webinar is being recorded, so you will get the links sent out to you afterwards, and then you'll have everything available to you as well. So the links will be provided so you can share it and have everything that we've talked about today. So with that, I would like to introduce to you Andy Coe, who is the principal of Convergent Nonprofit Solutions, and Aaron Bressois, who's the CEO of Golden Shovel Agency. These guys have some really great case studies and really good things to walk through today. So make sure you take notes and you have everything ready to go. If you have any questions during any time of the presentation, you can go ahead and type it in the question and answers box. There's a little question box over to either at the upper part of your screen or over on the right part of your screen. And feel free to type those in and we'll get to them at the end. Today's agenda is going to cover a whole variety of things, particularly around case studies, marketing examples for workforce and industry attraction, how to wrap up a campaign and what that looks like, as well as what you should do for economic development marketing during the process of a campaign. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Andy. Andy, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So wanted to give you a real quick overview of our firm prior to kind of diving into some of the specifics of our webinar presentation today. So for those of you that weren't on our part 1 webinar, Convergent is celebrating our 10-year anniversary. We're a consulting firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have currently about 35 projects around the country, and our specialty is managing fundraising efforts for nonprofit groups. Our area of expertise, our real bread and butter, is working with chambers and economic development groups across the country. And these are a handful of some of the organizations that we've worked for. So some extremely small. We've worked for Phelps County, Nebraska. We did a campaign there as less than 10,000 people, raised over $1 million. And then we've done campaigns for large groups like the Montana State Chamber, North Carolina State Chamber, and a whole host of regional and statewide and sometimes national organizations. So now to kind of get into the last time we really focused on the feasibility study and really setting the place for a successful fundraising campaign. So in this webinar today, really wanted to talk about the actual fundraising component, the actual capital campaign itself. So as a whole, most people are pretty familiar with how the fundraising process works. So when we finish the feasibility study, we let you know how much water's in the pool before you dive in. You update your plan based on the feedback that we received. Now it's time to go forward and actually solicit your stakeholders, your investors, your community leaders, people that will mostly benefit from the work that your organization does. So the upfront portion of the campaign is called the quiet phase. Some people mistake this as a secret phase. It's not a secret phase. It's a quiet phase. So the whole idea is that the beginning part of the fundraising effort, you're really going out and putting the pieces to the puzzle, the foundation, really the building blocks for your successful campaign. And that means you're developing your campaign materials. So like I mentioned before, you're updating your case for support, you're putting together your brochure, always want to have the outcomes-based return on investment analysis that really puts an impact on the programs that you're raising money for. Then we go through a prospect evaluation process, which we go out and actually will put together a target figure for every company or individual that will be going to ask for money. And then we'll also talk about who's the best person to go on that call. You're always going to be able to raise more money if you have local business leaders that have already made an investment themselves prior to going out and asking for a commitment from somebody else. And that really ties into your leadership recruitment, which is critical. Campaigns will succeed or fail if you do not have the local leaders that are in place that really command the respect of the business community and your local community. If you have the right leaders in place and they make an early commitment that will help set the bar high for others to follow, then you'll be teed up for success. And so, looking at this slide, you're really going from left to right as far as the order of events, because your first solicitations should be your volunteer leaders. Once they make their commitments, now you can go out and start your major prospect solicitations. So this front part of the campaign, the quiet phase of the campaign, is very methodic. It's very strategic. It takes time. Normally this component of a campaign is somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 months, 4 or 5 months traditionally, sometimes longer. But it's critical that you get those early commitments that are high, that will set the bar very high for others to follow. So on this front phase, the quiet phase, beyond your leadership, and then you're conducting your top 20 to 30 solicitations, you're really only looking at maybe a total of 30 to 40 max prior to really launching into your public phase of the campaign. And on this upfront component, you're really looking to secure 60% of your goal. Now it changes. You get to the public phase, you have a big public kickoff event. Typically, you're only announcing maybe 20 to 30 investors at that stage. Now the campaign takes a different turn. You're really turning up the heat, and it is pedal to the metal. You announce the initiative publicly. You use that momentum, communicate to your stakeholders, communicate to the community. Here's where we are. We already have 60% of the goal. There's only 25 investors right now. And here is when you really go out and broaden the base of support. It's your grassroots portion of the campaign. So it's not slow and methodic and strategic like the front end. This is pedal to the metal, and you're really using your leadership to go out and now broaden the base of support. So then you end up doing general solicitations, typically another 75 to 100 or more. Of course, it depends on the size of your footprint of the organization. And then, typically anyone that you don't meet with personally, you can do either a mass solicitation effort via sending out a letter and a brochure. You can do a telephone blitz or using social media. Last thing you want is to bump into people on the street and say, boy, we would have given money or we would have participated in that campaign, but we didn't know about it. So the whole idea is that going through this process, you want to obviously finish over goal, under budget, and on time. And then I'll spend the back end of the portion of the webinar today talking about investor relations, because just because you get through the fundraising piece of the campaign, that's really the hard work is done, but now it really turns into a really strong investor relations effort over the next few years, because the commitments that we get in our fundraising campaigns typically are 4 or 5 year commitments. And the reason we do that is typically most organizations, your strategic plan is 4 or 5 years. So the whole idea is you're painting the vision of the plan. Here's where we want to go. Here's how much it's going to take to get there. Here's how long it's going to take. And then you're getting companies then to make commitments over the years. And so it's critical that once you finish your campaign, that you have a strong investor relations component to it, because you want to make sure that those checks are coming in over the next 4 or 5 years. You don't want people to think that you've forgotten about them and they stop sending in checks. Couple quick examples, case studies I'd like to walk you through. We talked a little bit about the Thomasville Chamber previously. And this is one actually that I manage the fundraising campaign, and it is a textbook example of how critical the feasibility study is, and then using that information in your campaign to really engage the community and bring them into the fold as far as your fundraising efforts. So for those that weren't on the last call, the Thomasville Chamber ended up getting a building donated to them. They wanted to make that the cornerstone of their 5-year plan to overhaul and repair this new facility. But then they also wanted to do some marketing promotion because the area had fallen on hard times. Thomasville Furniture Industries had recently closed. They sent a lot of jobs to China, and Thomasville was in the news for all the wrong reasons. And so when we did the feasibility study, a lot of people said, well, number one, we think you're spending too much on overhauling this facility. It might make sense to just go build a new facility. And in addition, a lot of people talked about, well, we'd love to promote Thomasville. We'd love to market Thomasville, but anyone that's been to Thomasville, there's a big 3-story wooden chair downtown, and people call it Chair City. But a lot of people were saying during the feasibility study, well, what are we going to promote? The big chair? I mean, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but very telling that the chair was a symbol of Thomasville's past, and they were really concerned with the future. So we ended up recommending in their final plan a $50,000 visioning process that would include the city of Thomasville, the public, and the business community. That was not part of the original plan. And then when we updated the plan and we made this one of the key initiatives going forward, people were really impressed. They sat up in their chair when we went back to ask for money. They were sitting there going, oh boy, you actually listened. Like, you took our recommendation, you included it in the plan. Now it's up to them, of course, to then fund the plan to make it a reality. And the beauty about this story is that the city of Thomasville actually came in and funded the whole thing. They funded the $50,000, and they weren't even on our prospect list as one of the potential stakeholders. So it was a really good success story, and it was a great way that we engaged the local community. So the next couple slides, this might be a little bit hard to see, but this is basically their 5-year goal. And originally we tested somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.6, I think, million. We didn't find that amount, but I think their initial budget for refurbishing the building was about $1 million. And the community basically told us that that's too much, that they weren't willing to fund something like that. So they were able to sharpen their pencil and get the number down to $400,000 for their First Impression Business Center. And then the rest of the plan was a $900,000 goal over 5 years. Thomasville is a community of about 25,000 people. And this was 2009, by the way. They're in one of the worst economic climates since the Great Depression. And we ended up raising just over $1 million by the time everything was said and done. So the whole idea here to underscore that in really engaging your community, that if you engage them on the front end and they help you write the plan, when you come back later and show them that you've listened, they're going to help underwrite it. So already kind of jumped to the punchline earlier on the previous slide, but there are the totals, just over $1 million again in a very difficult economy. The other example I'd like to walk through, the case study, is the Roanoke Regional Partnership. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Roanoke, but it's a wonderful community just on the foothills of the mountains there. And when I managed their first campaign, about 7 years ago, they had a huge component there that was to really market the area as a great place to live, work, and play. They had a huge component about being outdoors and taking advantage of the local wilderness and wildlife and all of that the region had to offer. So the Roanoke Regional Partnership is a 4-county economic development region in Virginia, about 318,000 population, but they have pretty flat growth through the years. And so, as with a lot of other communities, they had difficulty attracting and retaining workers. And so with their economic development efforts, it was really interesting that a huge component of their plan that we were raising money for was to help promote the outdoors. They have a person that's dedicated within their staff to do nothing but focus on this initiative. They ended up creating within their economic development efforts their own half marathon and half marathon, branded as one of the toughest road marathons. I did the half and it was extremely difficult, so I can attest to that. They also created an outdoor festival called the Go Fest, and that has been building every year. And the same thing with the marathon, and they do bike races and other things, and this is all facilitated through their economic development efforts. And so it was interesting conducting that campaign on the front end. There were a lot of organizations, the healthcare groups, the financial companies that are a big cornerstone of the companies that are there in the region. They were very interested in attracting and retaining qualified workers, like a lot of other communities, but they weren't sure whether this was the way to go about doing it. It was not traditional economic development. But the beauty is, over the next 5 years, after we raised money in their initial campaign, they were getting huge traction. They ended up recruiting 1 or 2 new breweries to the area. I think New Belgium was one. And they recruited LL Bean and some other companies that really bought into this messaging that the Economic Development Organization was presenting. And so the beauty of it was that when we came back then to raise money for the next campaign, we ended up raising actually even more money. And so it really was about really strong investor relations and really putting their money where their mouth was and showing results from the initial campaign. So this is a screenshot of the Roanoke Regional Partnership website. And so their whole branding was Get Outside. And they have this whole initiative, Roanoke Outside. So you'd even go to the airport and they'd have kiosks there with all the things to do in the region. And a lot of companies, of course, would promote themselves there. But the beauty about this was talking to the CEO of the local hospital and some of the other real big employers in the region. They loved this because it was almost like an Austin type deal where, hey, we're going to promote the region as a great place to live, work, and play. And once we get the people here, the companies will come, right? But without the people, without the bodies there that are available to take those positions, then it's difficult to make things work. I think we have one other slide, and then I'll turn it over. Yeah. So then this is the traditional, beyond the promotion of the region and getting outdoors and getting outside. The results delivered obviously helps when you're going back out for a successor campaign, which is what we did. We ended up going back after the initial campaign, and we were able to show, here are our initial goals, here's where we ended up, and obviously the organization in this case had asking rights because all of the goals that we had laid out in the initial campaign, they met or exceeded. And so the first campaign, just under $3 million. The second campaign was just under 3.3. All right, I'll pass it off to you, Aaron.
All right, thanks, Andy. A great presentation, interesting. I'm Aaron Bressois, the CEO of Golden Shovel Agency. And I'm going to be showing 2 different case studies today about how some of the communities are using these dollars to promote themselves. One case study is going to be around business attraction, and the other one will be around workforce attraction, the 2 major concerns of economic development organizations today. We have 180 some communities we work with right now. I had a whole host of different groups case studies I could have chosen, but these guys are both unique, and these 2 particular cases are unique, and there's lots to learn from them, and particularly groups that are trying unique areas. So the first one, and the slide that I just pulled up, has to do with One East Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky as a whole. Eastern Kentucky has probably been dealing with one of the most difficult downturns in probably in the country, with the losing of some 10,000 miners. They have all of these people that were unemployed, and they really needed a new focus. And so it was decided to literally create Eastern Kentucky as an aerospace hub. Now, one of the problems at the time that they began this is there were no aerospace companies in Eastern Kentucky. what they could do is make a case for being in a hub, because the states all around, within a couple-hour drive, there were quite a few aerospace-related companies. And so they knew they had the workers and the talent, but they didn't have really any other major employers in order to use for their marketing efforts. Now, at Golden Shovel, we spend a heavy focus on success stories. We believe success follows success, and putting together stories of really the businesses that are thriving in the region. However, when you're starting off without any major businesses that are thriving in the region, it can be very challenging. And that was the case for Eastern Kentucky. Now, they did attract a plant called Brady Industries. It was a huge deal. It's a giant aircraft aluminum folding plant. It was $1.3 billion investment and almost 1,000 jobs. And finally, we had something that we could really push in order to use to attract other companies. So we focused in on, even at this point, even when Brady was still just arriving, before they'd even set up and thrived, there was room to be able to talk to the CEO of Brady Industries to find out why they made the decisions they made to move that business. We were already able to turn that into content that we were able to share out to other groups that were like it. So it all began with this. Now, when we do our marketing, and particularly with business attraction, we take a heavy focus on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has got all of the tools and the capabilities for us to be able to really carefully target who we want to communicate with. And that is a major focus. In this case study, you'll see carries through that. So let's go to the next slide. So once we had heard about this new press release, the first thing we did is put together an article called 7 Reasons Why Aerospace Companies Are Considering Eastern Kentucky. The channel that we used for distributing this is called LinkedIn Pulse, and that is their publishing platform. It's a really fantastic platform. It does not cost anything to use organically, although you can sponsor posts and give them a big push, and it has a lot of capabilities as far as managing your campaign. So this is what this looks like right here on the slide, is an example of what the article looked like. And then on like Charles Sexton's page, who's the executive director of One East Kentucky, as well as on the One East Kentucky's LinkedIn page, to the company page, we made sure those articles were posted. That's what it looks like here. And then we worked with a group called Related. They're up in Toronto, and what they use is artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at where certain types of companies are located. Now, we knew that we wanted to attract other aerospace businesses to the region. So we wanted to make sure that we were focused in on that. Now, we didn't need all aspects of aerospace. We were looking for particularly manufacturing-related groups. And so we used Related's data to determine where those aerospace companies were located, particularly which ones were in the manufacturing area. We found clusters that we were able to focus our marketing on. So we knew here that we didn't need to send our messaging into Fontana, for example, because there weren't any aerospace companies there. We were able to really focus in on specific areas. So we looked down at LA, up in the Toronto and area, down in Florida, and then all around the region where the hub was, of course. And then we also focused in on the Seattle, Washington area, because that next week, Chuck and his team were going to be flying to an aerospace conference that was going to be up in Seattle. And we were able to get some press out ahead of them so they had something to reference and talk about, so people would have heard about them once they got there. On the One East Kentucky page, we set up a microsite just focused on aerospace. So there's a couple of different pages, and what these are here to do is just to support the article. So once somebody saw the article and read it, if they clicked on one of the links to come back, we wanted to make sure that the first impression that they got was that there was a lot of support for the article that was out there. And so that those people would link right into an aerospace page. And it has a couple of different things on it. And this one, you've got the main and header graphic. It says aerospace. It hits some of the main cost, labor, accessibility on the top. And then as you scroll down, it made a case for the aerospace cluster, showing where all of the businesses were around Eastern Kentucky and where the aerospace facilities were located. And then if you click on the news section, we made sure that the news was focused on aerospace and advanced manufacturing articles so that people could see that there's a lot of activity going on. One of the strategies that we use, and including in this campaign, is we first sent out what we call the anchor article, which was 7 reasons why aerospace companies are considering Eastern Kentucky. But then throughout that same month, focused on smaller, more targeted articles that referenced items that were noted in the anchor article. So, for example, if one of the reasons why aerospace companies are considering Eastern Kentucky is because of a program they're taking an advantage of, then one of the supporting articles might be about that specific program. And that gives the content that you're making, especially when you're dealing with more rural communities, you don't necessarily have lots and lots of great content to be able to share all the time. And so you really want to, if you're going to have a big article about a major employer, you really want to get a lot of weight out of that. And so having an article that you can keep referencing back after you put all the hard work into it, that it carries some life, played a role in this campaign. And so we sent out the article very targeted to the groups. And at first, this is the type of information you can get out of LinkedIn. You can get to see what your sponsored reach was. So that was where we paid to put it onto the wall, the LinkedIn wall for people. We see that we had 133 clicks. There were 16 social actions, which are shares, follows. We had some new followers. That was great. Engagement was 1.32%, which is good. If you can get over 1%, that's excellent in LinkedIn. The organic reach did even better with has fewer impressions, but 18 clicks, 23 social actions, and almost a 3% engagement. That was just organic reach is all of the people that are either following the company page or following Chuck's page. That's all the people that reached. But those numbers are great to know, but they don't really mean anything until you really can look at the data. And so not only could we see that there are so many people that might have clicked or shared, but we know exactly what companies they were. Like we know that Boeing had 699 impressions on Boeing people in those areas, and that 7 of them clicked on the article to go to the, they either read the article or they might have even gone further to the site. We know what industry segment they were in, which is fantastic. So we know that people reading it got the article. We know the size of the companies, the people that read it and clicked on it. We know where they're from, so we can get feedback and validation on the regions that we were focusing on. So we know there's some of the areas we talked about, Canada and LA, Seattle area. We know that some of those people saw that, how many people were either saw the title or even clicked and read the article. And lastly, we know what jobs they had. I mean, these are really big organizations. It's good to know that an owner or a manager or a senior level person from the aerospace companies that we were targeting are the people that are actually clicking and reading it. That's who we were targeting. And we can see exactly what their job titles were in seniority. So that was an awful lot of information for us and made for a successful campaign. LinkedIn gave us some street cred in their newsletter that they put out, recognizing us for the work we did for the One East Kentucky campaign. We're really pleased about that. And then to take it to a whole nother level, what do we do now that we had this successful campaign and brought all this traffic back to the site? How do we know, what do we do with it from there? And there's 2 things that we can do on the sites. First of all, is we put in lead forensics. And lead forensics is a company we partner with for doing site tracking. And here's an example of it. Like if you're looking at this right here, you can see this is just the Golden Shovel site from a while back. I can see which organizations have been coming to visit our site. I'm going to click on, say, the International Economic Development Council. We're going to be speaking at that conference in a couple weeks. and they might have been checking out our site to get some information. And when you click on that, not only can I see that they've visited our site 8 different times, I can get some information about that particular company. And then to take it even further, I can see what pages they looked at, how much time they spent on them, and where their interests might lie. So the first thing that we can use with this type of data is it really validates that the organizations that are, once again, reading the article are aerospace companies, and that they're coming back and spending some time to validate the marketing efforts. Now, as you might imagine, lead tracking can be a little shifty in economic development. And so you don't necessarily want to pick up the phone and call a company because they're visiting your site. That's a quick way to not get that business. So, but what it does do, and allows us, you can see the companies that might have heard of you, might have been interested, so you can take advantage of setting up meetings with them at trade shows. In some cases, you can just use it to validate that the work you're doing is working. But the next thing that we do is tie it in with HubSpot. And so what HubSpot does is it allows for lead nurturing. It focuses on inbound marketing. So now that this company has read the article, they've gone to your website. On the website, they were able to, we know what they looked at and what they were interested in. Now, perhaps if we know that they're interested in aerospace, we can offer them something additional, like a white paper on the aerospace industry, or a webinar that's coming up, or an infographic in exchange. We get their email address, and HubSpot allows us to nurture that. So when there's other things that come out down the road that are related to aerospace, we know that the people that were on our site are interested in that. We can offer that to them and keep aerospace top of mind awareness with the people we were targeting the campaign towards. And this is their inbound methodology of how you go from a stranger to a visitor. And then once they're a visitor, they become a lead. And you're able to send them additional related information until eventually they become customers and hopefully promoters of your community. So that is one single business attraction case study of one particular campaign we did for Eastern Kentucky. And now I'm going to shift gears and talk about communities that are really focused on workforce attraction. And some unique things that these groups are doing using their resources to keep the talent. And the group that I'm going to focus on today is Yankton, South Dakota. Now, first of all, as all the economic developers listening in today would know, that there is the game has changed an awful lot. You know, it used to be all business attraction, business attraction, business attraction, and now getting talent to stay in your community and to come to the community has really become the focus, as the decisions to where people are going to live is carrying a lot more weight than the businesses and the jobs themselves. This is just from last year's already, so there are now more job openings than workers to fill them. You know, this is on CNN, and this is just getting, you know, unless you're in Eastern Kentucky where there's 10,000 workers ready to roll, this has been a big problem. And this is only going to get worse. We know now that there aren't going to be a lot more workers coming. Right now, there's already a lull, and that's going to put heavy competition between communities in order to get that talent. That is the new, if the talent isn't in the community, the businesses aren't going to move. And the businesses are keeping a very close eye on where the workforce is. That'll be their number one question, is the workforce, before they're ever going to look at sites or consider moving into your community. So what we do know, though, especially with rural communities, that there's this very strong fear that the talent's all leaving. You know, like, we're losing our kids. We don't have enough jobs here in this community because they're taking off and they're going to the urban areas. You know, we need to keep these people. And that's been titled the brain drain. And what we've found, and this is a lot of has to do with the work done by Ben Winchester from the University of Minnesota. He coined the term brain gain, and showed that the people that are going to move into your community, 30% of them will have already lived there once before. And they're not going to be coming in as college students. They're going to be coming in later on, after they've, when they're ready to raise a family, after they've had some experience. And the beauty of that is that there's actually a brain gain, because you're sending people out to gather information, to learn, to see new perspectives, to see the world, and then bring that back to your community to enriching it and to come up with strategies that allows, because even communities can get groupthink inside themselves. And so these are the types of groups that, especially with the rural communities, we focus on bringing families back and bringing people back to, in this case, Yankton, South Dakota. So what Yankton did, they built a microsite, and I call it a microsite not because it's a small site, it's a full-size website, but it's got a micro audience just focused on people living in Yankton. They built a site called Greater Yankton Living, and this sits next to their economic development site. So just to be clear, this is designed to make the best first impression to people considering living in Yankton. For example, their homepage. See, it's not a site, it's actually a guy playing guitar. And they did just some really creative things on their site, and just ideas you guys might want to consider for your own efforts to attract more workforce. The first thing that they did is they cover a lot of different stories, success stories about people that are thriving in Yankton, people that are like the people that they're trying to attract. And so in each of these cases, let's say you click on one of these. Here's Ben. He's a Yankton entrepreneur. There's a photo of him. You can watch a video about him talking about why he loves being an entrepreneur in Yankton. There's some great photos and descriptions down below, all about his story. Here's another one with Rebecca and Jeremy. They love mountain biking, and they like to cruise around their convertible in Yankton and do organic gardening. Just shows that there's these really cool quality of life, and you get to hear the passion from the people themselves and why they love being there. Another thing that they put on their site was employment opportunities. They're going to put those right on there. Hey, it's not in some cases, somebody might have a job and they're moving into the area, but in many cases, if they choose to really want to live there, that they might want to find a job, or if there's a trailing spouse, they're going to have to find work, and putting those employment opportunities right on the site is a great way to do that. Maybe more creatively and less often have I seen this, where you actually also post volunteer opportunities. With this brain gain and bringing back these older families, what we're finding is they don't engage the communities in the same way that it used to be done. They're not necessarily joining the Rotary or the Elk Club, or you might not even see them at the chambers. But they do want to get involved. They do have a mission to do good in the world. They want to engage the community. They just tend to do it differently. And having ways for them to volunteer and organizing those on the site to show that there's a lot of ways to engage is another way to show that both the community's support for the people that are living there, as well as ways for people to get involved. Another cool thing that Yankton did is every March they do 31 under 31. And so every single day they highlight a person that tends to be in their model kind of people that they're looking to attract that are already thriving in Yankton. Just like they do with the stories, these are a little shorter, and they highlight someone in the community every single day for 31 days. And what's so neat about this is that not only does it really recognize somebody in the community, but it gives them something that they can share through Facebook and the like with their friends. It also gives a nice way for people from the outside looking in, seeing that, hey, this community cares about its residents and recognizes them, at the same time showing all these great people that are thriving there. And then just recently, because of the success of that, they started putting up a page for people that have lived there for 31 years, and they highlight somebody on April 1st, the day after their 31 recognized people, to highlight someone that just lived there for so long and why they love it. Just really, really neat idea. Another thing they did is they put all of these on the job videos on their site, which I just thought was really interesting. It was just showing people different types of jobs. Unless you can actually go into one of the plants, like oftentimes you don't really get a chance to see what the work is like, what you'd actually be doing, or what your environment would be like. And so they trailed people from these different major employing companies just showing off their jobs, getting a little sense of where they work and what they do. And that it's really neat way to give people ideas on how they can find meaningful employment in the town. So, example of that. They use their Facebook page heavily with Yankton. What we've noticed, like I had mentioned earlier, when you focus in on business attraction, we use LinkedIn. That's by far been the biggest driver for traffic. It's the best for tracking. But when it comes to workforce attraction and talent attraction, Facebook is where most of the action is. You can see that their Greater Yankton Living page, which once again is separate from the Greater Yankton Economic Development page, has 14,642 likes on it. And Facebook's just a nice way to engage your community. Like, once again, if you're looking to attract other people, that even when you're doing the 31, it makes it easy for them to share it with their friends. And oftentimes the people that are going to move to the community know somebody in the community already, or had lived there once before, like I had mentioned. And I just threw this one in there. This is a callback to the One East Kentucky campaign. After we had run that campaign over September, October, by December, they had the announcement that another major company was coming into town. It was Enerblue. They were making batteries, and they had a video just saying, "Hey, Enerblue's coming to Eastern Kentucky," and we put that on the Facebook page. And I just wanted to note some of these numbers. This is one of the few economic development campaigns that actually went viral. You can see it reached over 248,000 people. There were 129,000 views of this video, and it was shared 2,248 times. And if you wonder what was actually shared, what were people writing in the comments, and what they were writing were other people's names. So instead of having any large explanation or script, it would just be someone's name. It'd be like this Tristan Gilman or Kathy Allen. And that would then put that post onto that person's wall. And what they were trying to communicate was, hey, there's going to be 500 jobs created, and you might want to consider this. And it just went viral, just went from wall to wall to wall to wall. And suddenly 248,500 people in Eastern Kentucky have seen it. So, and then lastly, I just wanted to note, we were talking about this competition. This is outside of Yankton, but the competition for talent is that there's places right now that are just paying people just to move. They are not even willing to do the marketing. They're just going to say, hey, we'll give you money. Check. And there's a whole list of them. Anything from just paying to move there, to paying off student loans, to give you a free land or house. It goes on and on. Here's a couple of the highlights. New Haven, Connecticut gives you up to 80,000 incentives. Harmony, Minnesota, $12,000 rebate if you build a house. Pretty interesting. Let me pass it back over to you, Andy.
All right, I'm ready to move to Yankton. Did they mention on their website, and what's the average snowfall in Yankton, by the way? I'm curious. Probably. I don't know. Probably not.
Probably.
That would be my one drawback. I don't mind snow every once in a while, but I don't know if I could deal with that amount of snow. But sounds like a cool place. Actually, I love South Dakota, and the people up there are wonderful. Well, to kind of wrap things up, I did want to talk through a little bit that I mentioned before about investor relations. So we have the front end piece with the feasibility study, setting the stage, getting that engagement, broad engagement with your community leaders and business leaders, actually going out then and securing those commitments to fund the vision, to fund your plan, but investor relations sometimes gets lost as not really something that is critical or important, and organizations sometimes don't give it enough time, the time of day that it really deserves. The real key here, though, is once you get those commitments, number one, you've now raised the expectations of the community as to where your organization is going to go. It now has additional resources that you didn't have before, and with that comes increased expectations. But the other piece is that stakeholders are looking for that they're going to be communicated to on a regular basis, and they want to know as well that the programs will be completed, the goals will be met, and that there's accountability in how the organization is spending money. So a couple things that I wanted to talk through today is we always recommend that a nonprofit organization, once you're done with a campaign, you actually put together a budget for investor relations. Because a lot of times we have lots of great ideas on how to engage your stakeholders over the course of 5 years, and they include, annual meetings or semi-annual get-togethers. It includes maybe putting together a gift for them, a token of appreciation. It includes sending out newsletters and emails and a whole host of things, and this all costs money. So the whole idea is that organizations need to take this as seriously as to designating a board member to oversee the plan, putting together an actual investor relations plan, and also attaching a budget to it. So you actually have money within the plan to facilitate some of the initiatives that are part of that plan. The other piece here is that we always recommend organizations put together an oversight committee. This is a huge component that stakeholders and investors love. An oversight committee is not a pay committee, but it typically is made up of your major stakeholders. So in the Roanoke example, a major stakeholder there, a major investor is $10,000 a year and up. If you're a $10,000 a year and up investor, you are part of the oversight committee. And as a whole, this is a group, it's not a decision-making group like a board of directors, but it's a group that you get together a couple times a year. You go into a little bit more of the details as far as, how much money has come in, where has the money gone, where's the money been spent, and then how are you doing against the goals that you laid out. So it's a little bit more granular than just sending out a newsletter with a little bit more of the promotional sort of informational type details. And then as part of that oversight committee, because it shouldn't be just your major check writers, you can invite, and we encourage organizations to invite a couple of stakeholders that are at the lower end. So it's not just the $10,000 and up, but you have a couple, and it can be, you can hand select people that are either part of a different region or maybe a small business that might have committed $2,000 a year, but for that small business, that's a really significant amount. So you can play with that, the makeup of the committee, but it is something that's really great because even people that aren't on the oversight committee, they understand that there's a group of investors that's separate from the board of directors that's getting these detailed reports and providing that oversight and accountability, and it gives them comfort. So a couple of other tips here is really just, you want to make sure that you maintain accurate pledge and payment records, that you send out courtesy reminders, they're not bills or invoices, and that you thank investors regularly, handwritten notes, recognizing them in the local newspaper, on your website, putting out the investor honor roll listing all of the companies and individuals that have participated in your fundraising campaign. And then constantly branding the effort, internal marketing and public relations, reminding people that without their support, these initiatives would not be possible. So just reminding them how critical it is for them to continue to fund and continue to participate, fill out those pledges that they made because of all the great work that the organization is doing. And if you're communicating the return on investment of their commitments constantly, they're going to make sure that they're fulfilling their pledges. So ongoing investor communications, newsletters, annual reports, definitely face-to-face meetings, especially for your major investors. If you remember from the last webinar, I talked about typically your top 10 investors make up about 60%, maybe more, of your total amount raised. So those top stakeholders you want to meet minimum on an annual basis, if not more, face-to-face meetings just to find out how they're doing, any improvements that can be made, suggestions, constant feedback is always good. And then putting together any special VIP opportunities at any time. And that, again, is regular briefings, newsletter profiles of your investors, red carpet tours, groundbreaking, sneak previews, and again, just that those constant touch points. The worst thing you can do is, we'll be out there talking to a stakeholder and they say, the only time I hear from these guys is when they send an invoice, and that's pretty much it. That's the last thing you want to hear when you're out there meeting with your key stakeholders. And that, I believe, we will wrap up. We still have time for Q&A. Happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. Thank you guys so much for that. That was a great presentation. Anybody have any questions? Again, all of these slides will be up and available to you, as well as the recording. If you have any direct questions, you can reach out to Andy or Aaron via email. Here. Any final questions? You guys did a great job. There's no questions. You answered all of the questions that we ever had.
I'm still waiting on the annual snowfall in Yankton question. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think it's, well, thanks, Andy. First of all, it's nice presenting with you. And I see all of these two areas are pretty connected, even though they are in different categories. It sort of flows from, first you have to be able to raise money, and then to get the results out of promoting your community.
Absolutely.
All right. I don't see any final questions, so thank you to our presenters, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Thanks, you too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Perfect. Have a good one.
Okay. Bye-bye.